Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Sammy Kahn. I'm the Executive Director of the Council on Science and Technology at Princeton University, and I want to welcome you to our annual Women in STEM panel. You know, this panel is my absolute favorite event of the year because it gives us an opportunity to be inspired by some of the most outstanding women in STEM at Princeton University. And, you know, these types of conversations are extremely important because even in 2020, women remain underrepresented in many STEM fields. We know from research that role models and conversations and building relationships is very important to encouraging everyone in STEM. And so we hope that this panel is a first step in reaching those goals. This is actually just one of many events that the CST does year-round to help everyone find their connection to STEM. You can learn more about what the CST does by visiting our website at cst.princeton.edu. And so on that note, I'd like to introduce you to one of my most wonderful colleagues, Dr. Catherine Ryamaki, Associate Director of the Council on Science and Technology, or CST, and also a very accomplished geoscientist in her own right. Catherine, are you all set?
I'm all set. Thanks, Sammy, and it's wonderful to have everyone joining us, and I'm thrilled to be able to participate in this panel with these amazing women. As Sammy said, this is one of my favorite also events of the year, just to get to hear from really accomplished women about their pathways and what they do now, and to hear questions that are on the minds of all of you in the audience. And so please, as we're going along, if you can write your questions in the chat. We'll try to leave plenty of time for those questions to get answered by the panelists. As Sammy said, I'm supposed to introduce everyone, but rather than hearing introductions in my voice, I'd like to actually turn it over to each of our panelists to introduce themselves. If you guys could just tell us what you teach, what you study now, and what your trajectory was to get here today. And Jenny, maybe we can start with you.
Sure. Nice to be here. So my name is Jenny Green, and I'm a professor of astronomy here at Princeton. I'm an observational astronomer, which means that I use mostly photons from the universe to understand how galaxies like our own came to look the way that they do, and how the supermassive black holes that live at the centers of galaxies interacted with the galaxies as they grew over time. And it's a great time to be an astronomer. There's gravitational waves that we've detected for the first time and lots of exciting new stuff. So I have a very fun day job. The other thing that I do at Princeton that is very related in many ways to STEM and representation is I'm the faculty director for the Prison Teaching Initiative. And one of the big things that we are concerned with there is STEM access for our incarcerated population. So I'll also be happy to field questions on that work. So in terms of my trajectory, I was raised by scientists. And so when I went to college, I was convinced that whatever I did, it wouldn't be science. And that I took the Western canon for my freshman year of college and realized that I was really disinterested in the question of whether or not we exist, and other philosophical big questions, and that my astronomy class was really making me much happier. So I sort of switched gears. And as a result of that, I was a little bit behind in my physics track. And so I took a year off between undergrad and graduate and spent the year at the Museum of Natural History doing education and outreach, which was awesome. That was the first year that the new, now not so new, Rose Center opened, which was 2000, 2001. And then I went to graduate school, and then I was actually a postdoc here at Princeton. Spent a year at UT Austin on the faculty there, and then came back to Princeton, where I've been since 2011. So that's the basics of my story.
All right, thanks, Jenny. Janine, I think I faked you out because your name sounds so similar. Go ahead.
That's okay. Thanks, Catherine. And before I forget, I want to thank Sammy and the Council on Science and Technology for hosting this and inviting me to speak. Usually I try to avoid any sort of public speaking engagement if I could. But this is one of the few things where I actually like to talk to undergraduates and try to share my experiences. Hopefully it resonates with some of the students. So I am a research scholar in mechanical and aerospace engineering, and I'm also a lecturer in chemical and biological engineering. All of my degrees are in chemistry, and I'll talk a sec about my path. But since I started here at Princeton about 10 years ago as a postdoc, I've been completely immersed in the engineering community, first MAE and then CBE. My research is polymers and materials, and I think it's a theme that's been consistent throughout. So I don't actually feel as though I changed fields or anything like that. I have been especially interested and fascinated by these materials called hydrogels, which are just polymer networks filled with water. And as part of our research program, we study new ways or develop new ways to make these materials and how they can be applied in different bioengineering applications. As far as teaching goes, I most recently, over the last few years, I teach juniors in the CBE core lab. Previously, I did a little bit of freshman seminar, which was a lot of fun. But now I tend to see mostly upperclassmen. Okay, so a little bit about my academic path. My undergrad was at Morgan State University, which is an HBCU in Baltimore. At the time I was there, the chemistry department was quite small. So it's actually really easy for me to interact with and develop relationships with professors. And when we get to the advice portion, I'll say mine right now, it's having good relationships and seeking out good mentors and advisors. Sometimes that's easy if the department is small or if you have small groups to work with, and sometimes you have to do little tricks like getting involved in research or something like that to try and seek out good mentors and a good professional network. But for me, one of the things that was sort of stood out for my undergraduate career was I did a lot of research as an undergraduate. And that's when I got exposed to polymers, which I still work on now. And I think I'll stop there because I've been talking for a few minutes. But yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions related to research or career paths.
Thanks, Janine. You can tell that she's a veteran of this panel because she anticipated the question I didn't ask and meant to ask, which is, please give a piece of advice. So
because I tell undergrads all the time, if they can, or if they get the opportunity to get involved in research. There's a caveat to that, but to try to if they can.
Yeah. Jenny, I'll back up in case you would like to offer a piece of advice to the audience. Or I can come back to you.
Oh yeah, come back to me. A single piece of advice, come back to me.
Okay. Sonia, how about introducing yourself?
Hi, I'm Sonia. I'm a lecturer in the chemistry department, so people might know me as Dr. Francis. I'm from Trinidad. Janine didn't mention that she's also from Trinidad, and I met her here, funny enough. And so I work in the general chemistry sequence in chemistry, and mostly my role is to, facilitate labs. So that's very different this year since it's all new, it's all online. Never did that before, but we're getting through it. So my trajectory, I actually did my undergrad in Trinidad at the University of the West Indies, and I did a double major in chemistry and management. And then I took a year off because I just wasn't ready to go to grad school yet. I was a little tired. And I worked in this food plant and titrated ketchup for a living, which you're like, why would you titrate ketchup? Well, there's vinegar in it. And so I also titrated mayonnaise, worst part of my job, and checked how spreadable peanut butter was. So it was interesting. I did enjoy tasting the peanut butter as part of my job. And then in that year, I applied for grad school. And so I actually went to grad school in Canada at the University of Alberta. And there I studied chemistry. I was in the inorganic division, but I was an electrochemist by training. My goal was to cure dandruff because 1 in 5 people suffer from dandruff or at differing levels of like how bad it is. But I did not want to pursue organic chemistry anymore. Nothing's wrong with organic. I just felt it wasn't for me. And I ended up doing electrochemistry. So working on fuel cells, which are devices that convert chemical energy into electrical energy. And then for my postdoc, which I did at Caltech, I worked on the opposite reaction, converting CO2 to fuels and other chemicals. So I was looking at, mostly searching for new catalysts to do these types of transformations. And then after that, I ended up here because all through that time, like when I got to grad school, I realized I really had this passion for teaching. And so I was looking for jobs where I could do more of that than research. Like I did enjoy research, especially at the postdoc level. But even though I was enjoying it so much and it was successful at the postdoc level, I did realize that I missed how much interaction I had with students and like planning, things for them to learn and enjoy chemistry more than a lot of people say that they do. Oh, one piece of advice, go to student office hours. Definitely come see me.
And not just if you're struggling.
Yeah, just come say hi. Come, talk about what you want to talk about. Come say hi. Getting to know students is really important for when one day you'll need a reference letter. And reference letters are more meaningful when I could say something unique about you rather than the blanket, they were a great student, which I never do. Like I always tell students, come meet me and let's talk about it before I write one. So yeah, that's my one piece of advice. We'd like to see you in office hours. We're not scary. We try not to be scary, so don't be scared. We love you. It's okay.
Excellent. Lindy.
Yeah, I'm Lindy Mcbride. I'm in the Department of Ecology and Evolutionary Biology and also at the Neuroscience Institute. And I grew up always, loving to be outside and watching animals and plants. I just love nature and outdoor activities. I thought I wanted to major in biology when I went to college. I wasn't absolutely sure. I briefly flirted with anthropology and geology, but I just kind of settled into it. It was just always a love of mine. I remember my eighth grade biology book. First time I had a real biology textbook. And so I knew I wanted to go to grad school. I was pretty confident in that, but I took a few years off because I also knew that once I started, it would be kind of a one-way trajectory and it would be hard to take a break. So I worked and I wanted to travel and be in the field. Just the irony is that I no longer do field work because my questions have brought me into the lab. But I did spend several years, working as a field assistant with other researchers in the Amazon and in Africa, and instructing outdoor education canoe courses for Outward Bound in Minnesota. I just did a bunch of, that was in some ways the best time of my life. But I also love research. So eventually I made my way back to graduate school in ecology and evolution, studying evolutionary genetics in insects, trying to understand how animals adapt to their environment, how they evolve at the level of behaviors, but also the genome. And I made a transition as a postdoc. I kind of went to a different field. I'd been a field biologist and I decided to kind of learn molecular techniques. And I found a system, mosquitoes, that offered the ability to both study in the field and in the lab at the level of the brain and the genome. So I went to a biomedical institute as a postdoc, which is a huge change in culture for me, although it's still biology. And then I came back around here to be, I guess, the only person. It's a slightly odd combination to be in ecology and evolution and neuroscience. But it's perfect for me. And I study mosquitoes and how how certain species, the bad disease vectors, have evolved to love humans and be attracted to the way we smell. Let's see, my piece of advice. I think Janine mentioned it, but I think as an undergrad, I like Sonia's advice of going to office hours. For those interested in continuing a career in research, I think finding a supportive lab, not just finding a lab that's doing work one's passionate about, but finding a lab with a supportive mentor is really essential, both at a graduate student and postdoc stage. So anyway, that might be a couple years off for many of you listening to this, but that's my advice.
Thanks, Lindy. Donkey, introduce yourself and one piece of advice.
Sure. Hello, everyone. So I'm Danqi Chen. I'm very happy to be here today. So I'm currently a second year assistant professor in the computer science department. And my research field is machine learning and more particularly natural language processing. So I'm actually not teaching this semester, but in the past year, so this is my second year. So in the past year, I taught the first undergrad course in my field, natural language processing, and I also taught a graduate seminar. And the next semester, I'll be also teaching this undergrad NLP course again. And my life trajectory is actually pretty straightforward so far. So I did my undergrad in China at Tsinghua University, studying computer science. So at that time, basically, like I would say, people don't really think too much about like the career options. So 90% or 80% of students will go to grad school. And I would say 1/3 of students will consider going abroad for graduate school. So at that time, I was like one of the top students. So I just chose to apply for a bunch of the graduate programs in the United States. And I got an offer from Stanford, so I decided to go to Stanford. So after I graduated from Tsinghua University, I spent the next 6 years at Stanford University without knowing, having absolutely had no idea about what kind of research I want to work on. So the next 6 years have been really fruitful, but also have been pretty stressful. But I survived the next 6 years. And I also really enjoyed the process of doing research and also interacting with all the collaborators and also the peers and the students. So in the last year of my graduate school, so I thought, okay, maybe I should try to get a faculty job. So I decided to do a round of job search, and this is where this is my first job, and I decided to come to Princeton. Actually, before I got the faculty job and before I joined Princeton, I also took like a gap year, and I work at Facebook because I work in AI, artificial intelligence, and machine learning. So it's totally a reasonable choice for me to just get exposed to the research environment in industry as well. Yeah, I think it's pretty straightforward. This is basically like where I have been and how I got here today. I also started to learn like how to do programming, how to code at a very early age, probably like 15 something. So choosing computer science and decide to study computer science is also pretty easy choice for me at that time. And I was also raising a family, so my parents also teach at the universities. So I feel like I also probably just have been influenced by them, and I really like teaching and I really like to interact with people.
Danqi, do you have a piece of advice?
Yeah. Yeah, if you are interested in doing research, try to get on that early. And if you go to my website, I actually have some like the office hours set up every week. So I'll be always happy to talk to you if you're interested in doing research in natural language processing. And I also currently have like several undergrad students in my lab, and I really enjoyed working with them right now. Yeah.
All right,
Thank you.
and I saved the best for last because she's probably the person that most of you would like to talk to, because Kaylin is a current student. And so in terms of what life is actually like for all of you, she will have the most to say. So just a reminder, please ask questions in the Q&A window in the panel. But I'm going to have Kaylin, why don't you introduce yourself and talk a little bit about what you do and how you know, what your trajectory was, and then fill as much time as you want with advice.
Okay, well, hi, I'm Kaylin. I don't have as extensive of a history as the rest of the panelists, but so I'm a chemistry major here at Princeton. I'm a third year or a junior. And I guess the reason I ended up choosing chemistry would be, well, it starts all the way back, you know, in high school. I've always had a strong interest for science, and like when it got closer to graduation, I started asking myself, or everyone around me started asking me, what do you want to do in the future, right? So yeah, when it came down to it, I thought that maybe I would be interested in doing research, but nobody in my family is involved in the sciences. So what I did was I just emailed a bunch of grad students at local universities asking if I could, you know, come see what they did for a day. So thankfully a lot of them obliged. So I was able to get, you know, some exposure to that. And then when it came time to apply to different programs, also I thought I might have been interested in engineering, but then because of how much I like the research aspect, I thought that like the sciences, the natural sciences would be a better option for me. So yeah, I ended up going to Princeton and pursuing a chemistry degree. So I guess advice that I would have would be, if you ever have a question, it's going to be a lot more easy and fruitful to find someone who has experience in that field to help you answer it, instead of looking for the answer yourself. Even though it's easy to Google, like it's a lot of sketchy information out there. So especially at Princeton, I find that a lot of people are more than willing to like give some of their time to help you out. And the important part of that is it's like a system that pays itself forward, right? So like when you get to their position or a position in the future, like you just have to keep mentoring the people below you. And yeah, I think that's mentorship is super valuable, is my main piece of advice. Yeah. Are there any questions?
Awesome. Well, while people are thinking about the questions, because there's always a delay in, you know, when that gets typed up in the Q&A. I think a bunch of you basically said, you know, make these connections, find mentors, get involved in research. And I'm sure what's on lots of people's minds is, how do I do that? Especially given sort of where we are right now in a virtual world. Sonia, you gave very practical advice, right? Which is go to office hours. And you don't have to wait until you are struggling with a course to go to office hours. We who hold office hours also like that personal connection. So you're sort of doing us a favor by coming to office hours. But you know, you can come and chat Ketchup versus Mayo, and you know, you can chat about course topics that you know, you may or may not be sort of working through. But other practical advice. So we're curious what you guys have to say.
I can go first. So I've mentored a lot of undergraduates who had expressed interest in doing research and who've worked with me, whether it's just semester or summer, or actually I have some who've stayed with me for years. And there have been different approaches. So some of the students just send emails out and see who responds. You know, professors are busy, but every so often you will get a response back. If you can reach out to someone else in the group, whether it's a graduate student, as Kaylin mentioned, or a postdoc, they may also respond to you and at least be willing to talk with you to see if there's anything that, you know, that might interest you. Another way you can do it is through your coursework. So when you're interacting with your professors in the course, and if there's anything that you find interesting and you know the professor has an interest in it, you can continue that conversation and ask for advice then on how to get a lab experience. I think some positions are posted with student employment, not that often, so you can keep a lookout for that. And there are also many summer experiences for research, so REU programs, whether here at Princeton or at other institutions, and those tend to be circulated through departments, or you can just look them up. Just do searches and start looking those up and see who is offering REU programs that you can do. And I encourage summer research, because one of the caveats to me saying, oh yeah, go ahead and do research, is that you have to keep in mind that it is a time commitment, and you want to invest both your time and to understand concepts. And so if you have a full course load and you're an athlete or you're a musician or you're a dancer and all of that other stuff, you may not necessarily have the time to commit to that. And so leaving it for summer or for a little bit later, that's also good. Just be honest with how you can manage your time.
And just to clarify for everyone, REU is research experiences for undergraduates. And quite often those are research programs funded by the National Science Foundation. So if you're looking for those NSF, REU, those are kind of the acronyms that you might look up. Other thoughts on this topic, Jenny?
Sorry, I'll just add a little bit. I think this is very department dependent, but certainly in astronomy, we have 10 to 15 of our majors per year do summer research with us, and it's a pretty established program. So in addition to the REU applications, we always encourage our students to apply locally. And so I think a lot of programs also have formalized research for the summer. But one thing that Janine's comment just triggered for me, and this is probably for more advanced undergraduates, but certainly if you are thinking about grad school, I've started telling my students to try to pick one project that they can do for a little longer so that they can have some sort of product. Maybe it's not a publication, but just stick with something long enough so that you can show when you're applying that you actually stuck with something. And a lot of our students are like, I'm going to try every single kind of astronomy before I apply to grad school, so I know it. And I think that's also great, but trying to stick with one lab, even if partially it's remote, to just give yourself a little bit more time to have results that you can talk about, I think is helpful in going to the next step.
So that I think leads into a question that was in the Q&A, which is, when would you recommend students reach out? Lindy, you had said, well, maybe not yet. Jenny, you're saying maybe sooner rather than later, so you can do this for a little while. So, what are the thoughts about that and kind of the trade-offs? I mean, Janine, you were saying this is a time commitment, so be aware of that. Lindy, did you want to?
Yeah, I didn't. I'm not quite sure what I said. Sorry. I don't necessarily think people should wait if they're really interested in research. But I was thinking in my mind, as Janine was saying it, that it really is a time commitment. One problem. So I often get emails from, not often, a few a semester, I'd say, emails from undergraduates interested in working in the lab, and I have had some work in the lab successfully. But I often find that when people, what's also happened many times is that people haven't quite understood how much time it takes to really get into a research project. And it depends a little bit on what the project is, but certainly the things that we do, they require learning techniques and collecting data over significant periods of time. And so I often tell people to think of it like a sport. If you're really interested in it and you're really motivated to do it, it can really be a rewarding experience. And I'm sure there's some types of research or some labs, even in the departments I'm in, that where you can have fruitful experiences that require less time. But I've at least found in my lab that often people don't quite understand the time commitment that is required to have a really rewarding experience. But if you're really passionate about it and you want to put in that time, it can be wonderful. And as early, I mean, I often, well, again, I'm not sure about often, but I do get emails from first years asking about research opportunities. So that's not, I don't think it's ever too early.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I actually started as my second semester freshman year when I was an undergrad in a research lab. But for me, in a sense, I was a little bit clueless as an undergrad. I didn't know what I was doing. And, you know, a professor suggested just for me to get exposed to it. And I liked it, so I just stuck it out. And I worked in this one particular lab for most of my undergraduate time. But if you can get a little bit experience, maybe before your senior thesis, it's good. It's like a good practice before you start doing your own independent work. But it really does depend on what your schedule is and all the other things you want to experience in your undergraduate time.
So we've been talking about research, and I don't want to give the impression that like that's the only way people can get involved in STEM. So there are all sorts of student organizations. And Kaylin, I'm wondering if you have any advice on sort of navigating the extracurricular opportunities at Princeton.
Yeah, sure. Well, obviously there's research, but outside of that, well, I'm personally involved in the CST Student Advisory Board. So yeah, we talk about different STEM related events that the board hosts on campus or virtually now, I guess. And also there are like societies or clubs for each department, I think, for undergrads. So I'm only really most familiar with the chemistry one, the PECS, Princeton University Chemical Society, but I know there's like an equivalent for the other STEM departments. So that's something you get involved in, and that's really interesting because usually there's a range of all class years in those clubs, so you can definitely interact with people from every class year to get to know what it's like in a department before you join it. Or yeah, and also get to meet people who are like-minded and have similar interests to you.
Helen, I just want to thank you for the plug for the CST Student Advisory Board. That's a fantastic way to get involved, and applications are still open at our website. So I hope that encourages other students to join in. If you don't mind, Catherine, I'd like to jump in with a question from the audience, because I think this is really getting to the crux of why we have a Women in STEM panel. So the attendee asks, hi, would love some advice on how to feel comfortable in male-dominated labs. In a previous lab, I was really intimidated by being the only girl and tried to fit in and do, quote, traditional male things, like wearing baggy clothes and pitching my naturally high-pitched voice to be lower. I recently joined a new research lab and I'm swinging towards the opposite spectrum, emphasizing my feminine qualities. Do you have any advice on how to feel comfortably, just feel comfortably myself? And that's to everybody.
I could start, I guess. So back home, actually, maybe 60% of my class was female, so I didn't experience that as an undergrad, but definitely as I moved away from home, you know, I was in the minority, both as a female and as a Black woman. But one thing that I think helped was just it's more like a mindset thing for me that, listen, I'm going to be unapologetically myself, but still maintain a professional persona. Because at the end of the day, this isn't like, I know you're going to make friends in your labs and things like that, but at the end of the day, this is a professional opportunity for you. And if you view it like that early, even if this is not like, you probably don't think of your like summer research or semester research as a job, right? Because you're a student, but it is kind of the beginning of what a professional career would look like for you. And it's easy to say that, like, just be yourself. But I think it's important to, you know, decide this is who I want to be and this is who I am, and to project that. The other thing is that I think coming to panels like this and talking to mentors who have the same identities as you helps a lot. So often, you know, seeking out people who are women, if you're a woman and you're having trouble feeling like I can be a woman in this space, talk to women who are in that space and say, well, how do you, you know, embrace your femininity in this space? And you say, well, you know what? Today I'm going to wear lipstick, you know, like, I mean, that sounds like trivial, like, you know, you're probably not going to wear it now because of masks, but, you know, or today I'm going to do my hair, and, you know, and that's what you want to do. Like, just do what you want to do. I think too, if it becomes like a problem, definitely talk to your mentor about this, because it's important to have an environment where everybody feels welcome and doesn't have the mental load of having to think about these things while they're trying to work. And I think more so, especially this summer, there were more conversations about this going on in science about, you know, some people weren't realizing that some of their, you know, mentees were feeling this way because they didn't say anything. Because sometimes, you know, professors are busy and they might not see a thing that is so clear to you, right? Because you're in that space and they just didn't see it. And so even, you know, bringing it up with them or talking to, you know, adjacent professors who, you know, also might feel that way or felt that way, because a lot of us at some point in our careers probably felt like, yeah, I don't feel like I fit here. But it's not really about fit. Like, you don't have to fit anywhere, because fit means you're just like everybody else. You want to go in there and bring your strengths to that group, and then collectively you'll will be better, right? So I try to like think, I don't have to be like them. I just have to be me and bring my best self every time to that group so that we can all be our best collectively. So I don't know if that helps a bit, but that's kind of like the mindset that I always try to like keep up so that I don't, you know, start to feel imposter syndrome, which is what it sounds like, I think.
One of the things that I've done, you know, for my own professional development is really expand the scientists that I follow on Twitter as a way to sort of diversify my view of what a scientist is, who a scientist can be. And I think that's been a particularly powerful tool over the last few months, as different people have said, you know, this is what a scientist looks like as well. There's a new documentary coming out that I heard about through these connections called Picture a Scientist, which is about female scientists. And so you might check that out, because I think you'll see that there is a range of ways in which you can be a woman in STEM. Jenny, I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about that, because with the Prison Teaching Initiative, I mean, you directly deal with the stereotypes of who might do scientists, who might do science and who might not.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of, well, I'm part of this NSF Includes grant that's trying to broaden participation among the incarcerated and formerly incarcerated in STEM. And so we have all of these conversations about how to combat the narrative of who a STEM person is, you know, and it's so very tricky to figure out, like, how much of it is internal to each of us and our own imposter syndrome, and how much, I mean, there's, particularly for the incarcerated population, there are so many levels of, oh, they're not STEM people. But, you know, if you talk to my students, lots of them want to do engineering, lots of them want to do business, which requires a lot of STEM. A lot of them want to do psychology, and just, we've talked about, you know, stories for our returning citizens formerly incarcerated who are pursuing PhDs and just trying to get, like Sonia said, try to have representation that's visible so that people can imagine themselves in those roles. And for that population too, just kind of making the connection between career paths and STEM, which maybe is less relevant for undergraduates here who may have a broader view of what career paths are. But we have an RU program on campus that targets our former students from inside the prison walls, and they're just like, someone wants to pay me to do research. What? So just making those opportunities available makes a huge difference in people's internal narratives about what they can do, I think.
I can say something real quick. One of the things that was really nice for me to see when I started in an engineering lab was one of the more senior postdocs. She would show up every day in heels and full beautiful makeup. And I thought that was so awesome because I was actually not used to that in my previous labs. And so while I don't wear makeup because I don't want to, it was nice to see it. And for whoever's asking the question, so long as you're safe in the lab, so whatever you're wearing, safety is number one, don't ever forget that. And as Sonia said, professionalism is important. These are people who, some of these people are writing your letters of recommendation. So keep that in mind and try to maintain a somewhat professional environment. You should not feel that you need to wear either certain clothes or not wear makeup because of the others around you. And you may actually be inspiring someone else when they see you.
Lindy, I know you don't do field work as much now, but did you want to talk at all about sort of gender in the field and your experiences?
Yeah. In my area of, STEM, representation of women, I think, is less of a problem than it is in many other areas. And so I never, I certainly found myself doing field work with, the thing about field work is you can be very vulnerable because you're out, you could be out in the middle of nowhere and it's often a small group of people. I was lucky not to have really negative experiences, but they do happen, and it can be particularly vulnerable for women if you're working, in the rainforest with, a bunch of men. So I think it's something to think about. I guess I don't have great advice. I mean, I haven't had bad experiences myself, but in many cases, one thing to look for, I guess, is field opportunities where there is sort of a written, code of conduct for field research. I think more and more groups that do field work, like more established groups or things like RU programs or, universities or departments or labs will have on their website, for example, a code of conduct. And when you see things like that, it's a signal that the people there care about it, at least, and are thinking about it. Yeah.
If you don't mind, I'd like to just jump in and follow up a little bit on this idea of who is a STEM person, right? And there seems to be this understanding or a belief, or I think misconception, that people need to know that they're a STEM person early on. And so I think a lot of students at Princeton, particularly in a place where you have this vibrant liberal arts education, that they have to know in their first year, I'm going to be a STEM concentrator, and they're nervous about the other courses that they're taking, or vice versa. Students who have other passions worry, is there a reason to connect to STEM? In fact, one of our audience members says, how do I know what I want to study? How do each of you discover the things that you're passionate about? So I wonder if any of you would mind speaking to that.
I mean, it's pretty recent for me, so I guess it's fresh in my mind. Yeah, I know that in my intro, I made it sound like really straightforward. Like, yeah, I talked to some grad students and I knew, but it wasn't that straightforward. So I've always had like a very strong interest in languages because I'm from Canada, so I do English and French, but my parents are Chinese Chinese, so I do Mandarin too, but I also used to live in Japan, so I knew Japanese. So I really wanted to do comparative literature at Princeton. That was like a very like favorable option for me, I guess. And there's no real way to bridge comparative literature and chemistry. So I ended up having to make a choice between the two. Okay, maybe you disagree, but I really thought about it and I couldn't find a way to do it.
I feel like that's a challenge accepted from CST.
We're ready.
Okay. Well, yeah, for me, what ended up doing it was thinking about what I wanted to do my independent work on, because in the end, like that sort of research aspect in either field was what I was drawn towards. So thinking about what I would want to spend like 50% of my senior year doing, which one would I have a better time doing? That's how and like I wasn't a senior, so the only way I could find that out was by talking to current seniors in the chemistry and in the comp lit departments. In the end, I decided, spending 20 plus hours a week in the lab doesn't sound that bad at all, actually. So I chose chemistry.
Do any of you have passions outside of STEM that perhaps people in our audience can relate to and understand that you can be a STEM person and a music person or any other types of passions you might have?
So all through university, I played in the national orchestra in my country. And then for grad school, I played in my university band, and in my postdoc, I played in that university band, because that was like my thing outside of the lab to go do with other people. So I did music for a long time. I played drums at first, so snare drum, and then trombone and euphonium in orchestra and band. And then I really like Lego, and I tried to use that in my career. So if any of you are in Gen Chem, that I like Lego a lot. I actually have a Lego stress ball right now for when I'm nervous. But yeah, I think it is important to have other things outside, because, moving your mind away from the thing that you're studying, I find that helps me generate ideas more, because you train your mind to do something else, so that when it comes back to it, it's fresh again, and you could see it with a new perspective. So music for a long time was that for me. I haven't had time to play now, but I do have time to play with Legos and try to work them into the curriculum. So yeah, I think there's other things outside of STEM that get your interest as well. So
I was going to say one thing related particularly to the previous question about how to figure out what you want to do. I think it can sometimes be pretty paralyzing to, at least for perfectionists like myself, to think, what is it that I'm supposed to do? What is it that I most want to do? I have to find that thing. And I think maybe a better attitude is, am I interested in this particular thing? When going through your classes, which class gets you the most excited, or which question gets you the most excited? And it doesn't have to be what you want to do eventually. It's okay, maybe you try it and you're not that excited about it. But just kind of being aware of what, again, you get most excited and passionate about, and then trying it out, I think is a great way to go. And I really liked your suggestion, Kaylin, of thinking about what you want to spend your time doing, because it's not only being excited about the questions, but then it comes to what are you actually going to be doing to answer that question? And both things are important. You want to be excited about the question, but you also want to enjoy the process.
Go ahead, Jenny.
I got into astronomy late. If you read graduate applications, people always say, I love looking at the stars as a kid. I loved, so many astronomers knew at a young age, and I didn't, but I did take this class in high school, and I remember thinking, if I was smart enough, this is what I would do. I think this is so cool. And so I guess I just encourage you not to put those artificial boundaries about, I have to fit into this box in order to do this thing. If you do find yourself really excited about some random class that you took, go talk to, so my first year in college, I just went to the astronomy department and said, what would it even mean to major in astronomy, right? Like I'd never met an astronomer, right? And they were like, oh, we'll fly you all over the world. We have so much data. We don't know what to do with it. And so it sounded fun. I wanted to go all over the world. They did. I spent 6 months in Chile. So anyway, I think, I second do what gets you excited, and also try it to see if the day-to-day is as exciting as the big picture.
I'd be remiss if I didn't jump in with a quick plug with what CST does. It's so much of what you're all talking about, which is to help people connect in whatever ways work for them. And so we every day merge the arts and humanities and social sciences with STEM, because we don't see those silos. And, when you actually talk to people working in the fields, for example, I even think of some of the work Catherine's done this year with the geosciences and the arts. And merging painting and recording through paintings and drawings in the fields and so on. You never know what you're going to be finding. And so that's one of the things that we try to do at the CST, is help students and faculty and others find those connections, because they are artificial silos, as some of you have mentioned. We had a couple of questions that actually deal with graduate school or being a graduate student at Princeton. And so there are students in the audience who are interested in how to apply for graduate school. Is it okay to stay here if they want to go to graduate school at Princeton? And then there's even a question about how can graduate students help the younger students, undergraduates and others in STEM? So I wonder if anybody is up for addressing that.
I guess I can start with preparing for grad school applications. Again, this is where it's come up a few times now. Hopefully you have some sort of support system and network, and you have advisors, and you have people you can go to talk about these things. Because grad school is a bit of a different environment from undergrad, because you're going to work in a group, or you're going to work in a lab. Yes, there's coursework, but a large part of your graduate school experience would be your research experience. And so you look at schools and you make your decisions based on what you think you want to do and what you think you want to study research-wise, and how you prepare your personal statements. And one of the things that I think was most important for me in terms of my grad school application were the letters of recommendation. I think if you get strong letters of recommendation, they help a lot with the entire application process. Sammy, I forgot what the other questions were related to that.
One of the questions is, what about staying here for graduate school? If you're an undergraduate, what about staying at Princeton?
If there's a program, and if there's a group, or if there's something that you really, really, really want to work with, yeah. I think one general piece of advice that's given is to don't stay at the same institution. So where you did your undergrad, go somewhere else. So between grad and postdoc, again, change again, and because you want to be exposed to different environments and different groups and different people and different ways of thinking. And so I think that's a general, very good piece of advice, but that may not necessarily be right for you. We can always give advice, right? But if you specifically find a group that this is exactly what I want to do, and this is the best place in the country for me to do it, then if you get the opportunity to do it, there's that.
We are almost out of time, so wondering if now would be a good time for sort of last pieces of advice from each of our panelists. And maybe we can go in reverse order this time and start with Kaylin. Putting you on the spot, is there anything that hasn't come up that you think would be good for the participants to know about?
I don't know, my mind keeps on going back to that question about how to be yourself in male-dominated environments. And I forget who said these words, but someone said like internal narrative. So like in the end, it's just about like how you act is, it's really hard to phrase these types of things, but like personally, I've always been, not always, I try not to be, but sometimes I catch myself being afraid of falling to stereotypes about women in STEM, like, oh man, I sure hope I don't seem like the dumb girl in the class right now, or just like wanting to be seen as, you know, reliable and trustworthy despite being like a female in STEM. But in the end, like I noticed it wasn't the actions of anybody else around me that was making me feel that way. It was just about how I was thinking, like my own internal narrative of my time there. Obviously, there are cases where people will, you know, sort of put you down subtly because you're not male, but a lot of the time it is just what you yourself are thinking and like how, if you're running in circles in your own mind. So,
yeah. Danshi?
Yeah. Actually, I want to share very quick, like a little bit of experience I want to share earlier. I didn't say that, like, so actually when I was younger, I was very into humanities subjects. I really excelled at all those subjects. But later I moved away and started to do the computer science and learn a lot of the mathematical subjects. And and then in grad school, I came to my current field, natural language processing, which actually exactly sits between like the linguistics and also like the artificial intelligence or computer science. So basically my point, I finally found, okay, this is exactly something that I'm actually passionate about. This is actually really echoes what I was interested in maybe 10 years ago. So this really just clicks my real interest. So basically my point is like, if you're not sure what you really want to work on now, just keep going, keep working on. Eventually you will find something that maybe just when you look back, this is just exactly the right thing for you to work on. Yeah.
Sonia. I don't remember. I may be out of order here. Sorry.
I think that one thing is I know a lot of people talk about being passionate about STEM and like, you know, this is like I eat, breathe, and live STEM. And I feel like sometimes that could turn into like a toxic passion thing. And I know it's okay to not feel like 100% of the time you have to be thinking about the problem, and it's okay to rest. I think a lot of students don't understand the importance of rest because, especially when we were all here, you know, you're in the orange bubble and everybody's working all the time and we have to be the best and we have, and I think it's lost on you that, you know, just take some time to just do nothing. You know, just do nothing. Like, and that's okay. It's not wasting time. It's like resting your mind, because your mind is not going to be best when your body's not at best, you know. So I think that it's important to rest. I always tell students I take naps. When I'm tired, I take a nap, I get up and I go back and I do my work, and that's okay. It's okay to be tired and to rest. Another thing is, you know, talk to people. Like, I think in the Zoom, I know there's a lot of students that use the private chats to like do study group things. Like, do things like that. Just be like, hey, would you like to be in my study group, and make connections that way, since we can't make connections in real life right now. And talk to other people about, hey, what are the kinds of programs you're applying to this year? And don't treat it as a competition so much as a, hey, let's all try to do all these things together, and, you know, your victory is my victory, and like things like that. I know it's hard to like hear something like that because everything seems like a competition, but I feel like I learned so much from working with my research friends and reading each other's like applications and like giving each other like genuine advice. Of course, you know, you actually want to do this with your friends, right? People that care about you. But I remember that was one of the things that I really appreciated with some of my graduate students and postdoc friends, that we were always, you know, exchanging ideas and being okay with the idea of exchanging ideas. So like talking to people, I think is really important. Like no man is an island. So take naps, talk to people. That's my last 2 bits.
Excellent. Lindy?
Yeah, I just have a little thought to add for those interested in graduate school, which is that in different fields within STEM, what makes a successful application and what you should do to prepare can vary a lot. And so it's probably pretty important to, for example, I know in EEB, it's standard and expected that you reach out to specific potential mentors at a place you're applying for. But in neuroscience, that is not as expected, and you apply to a good department and then you find a home after you get there. So I think it's important, depending on what field you're interested in, to reach out to faculty, go to their office hours, write them an email, or graduate students or postdocs who are in the field that you're interested in, just to get more information.
Excellent. Janine?
Yeah, I guess my one closing piece of advice is that, in your coursework and in all of the work that you're doing here, the grades are necessary, and, I can't tell you they're not important. They're necessary, they're there for a reason. But I just want to encourage everyone, because I don't think I appreciated this as much as I should have as an undergrad, is that it's much more important to just have a good grasp of concepts. And yes, you want a good grade, but just, focus on understanding as opposed to passing exams or passing tests, because that's going to help you more later on. I've worked with students who may not have necessarily gotten the A in a course, but actually had very strong applications for grad school because they demonstrated that they understood concepts, whether it was through research or through their senior theses, and went on to have quite successful, graduate school careers. And so just keeping everything in mind and not getting too caught up in the details of the coursework. Yeah.
And Jenny?
So just having the benefit of having heard everybody else, I guess one really strong theme throughout the whole hour really has been to try and stay connected to peers, to mentors at all levels, and feel free to ask questions. So I just want to amplify that message. And I think we're really actually very lucky. I think the sciences are actually quite social. Every field is a little bit different, but my understanding of humanities work is that it's really quite individual, and science, whether it's the lab unit or, in my department, we all meet every morning to talk about papers, but I think, we do try, there is a lot of our work that is communicating our results to each other. And so throughout your career in science, however it takes you, whether it's research or not, I do think being in contact with each other is a big part of it. And the other thing I'll say, just as I think about my own trajectory, is just like it's okay to take naps, I think it's also okay to have bad days. It's sometimes you are going to be feeling like you're an imposter, and so but there is going to be someone else who comes into your life that is like you in some way, that inspires you, or you're just gonna make that breakthrough after 3 months of debugging, or we all have bad days, and it doesn't mean you're in the wrong place. So that's what I'll say. And just thank you guys for bringing us together. I was very inspired by talking to all of you. So.
Absolutely. I'm going to slip in one more piece of advice, and then I will also reiterate the thanks. Take a freshman seminar. If you are a first-year student and you have room in your schedule, in terms of making connections and finding a mentor, I say this with some self-interest because I've taught a bunch of freshman seminars in the past, and I get to know the 14 or 15 students in that class pretty well. And I consider them my mentees for their entire time at Princeton. So, if you're interested in any of the topics, if you can find the space in your schedule, please do that. I also want to thank everyone, our panelists and the participants who came. You guys are so inspiring. So thank you. And I'm going to give Sammy the last word here.
Oh, well, my piece of advice is feel free to reach out to these wonderful panelists and to the CST, because we all care about you. And we want you all to find your connections that are meaningful to you. So on that note, I want to thank all our wonderful panelists who are inspiring. And I want to thank all the attendees for giving us your time. And we know it's an unusual semester, but we want it to be a wonderful one for you. So we wish you all the best. And thanks so much to everyone on behalf of the CST. Take care.